Cuban Ministry of Energy and Mines is working on restoring the national power grid after failure led to a nationwide power outage. The South Korean Defense Minister Kim Jong-un resigned amid the unprecedented crisis in the country. And the permanent representative of Russia to the United Nations, Vasily Nevencia, denounced that Ukraine is helping the Syrian rebels against the government of President Bashar al-Assad. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela, we begin with the news. The Cuban Ministry of Energy and Mines reported that they are working since early Wednesday morning on restoring the national power grid after failure led to a nationwide power outage. The Cuban Electric Union specified that the power grid was fully disconnected at 2:08 a.m. local time. The failure's cause was due to the unexpected shutdown of the Antonio Guiterres thermoelectric power plant located in the western region after being automatically disconnected. In the past few months, the Cuban national power grid has suffered important affectations, most of which are related to the hardships imposed by the illegal U.S. blockade against the country, preventing it from acquiring equipment and supplies to condition and improve its capacities. And on Tuesday, the Venezuelan National Assembly approved in first discussion the draft budget law for the financial year 2025, presented by the Executive Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez. The legislative body highlighted the truly revolutionary character of the project that marks the beginning of a new cycle in the political, social, and economic life of the Bolivarian nation. The president of the legislative body, Jorge Rodriguez, recalled that the current good health of the economy is the product of the resistance of the people, and the norm that the parliamentarians are now discussing was born from the popular power. Parliamentarian Jesus Faria will now be in charge of referring the bill to the Standing Committee on Economic, Finance, and National Development.
Vice President Delcy Rodriguez arrived at the National Assembly with good news. In spite of the illegal blockade by the United States, Venezuela's economy grew in 2024 and will continue its upward curve by 2025.
The ECLAC had projected a 5% growth for the year 2024, and 8.5% is the GDP growth for the first 3 quarters of 2024. The International Monetary Fund remained timid as always, and we can already affirm that 14 consecutive quarters of economic growth have been achieved in Venezuela.
De crecimiento económico en Venezuela.
Why is it important to highlight it? Because unlike other countries, Venezuela is the rude victim of a siege, of an unprecedented economic aggression.
De un asedio, de una agresión económica sin precedentes.
Growth was expressed not only in Venezuela, but also in Latin America.
And so we see that Venezuela will grow more than Bolivia, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Uruguay, according to ECLAC projections for the year 2025. Venezuela will once again be among the countries that grow the most in the region. You know that our opinionate is, of course, difficulties, of course, vulnerabilities, of course. A country under siege as Venezuela is under siege, of course, but also what a great victorious resistance that our economy has had, mainly by its people.
The presentation of the budget of about $23 billion for 2025, almost 80% of which will be destined to social issues, is the triumph not only of the economic aspect, but also of peace, which will be defended against the plans of the Venezuelan ultra-right wing that are being dismantled.
A esos extremistas hay que decírselos en la cara.
We have to tell those extremists to their face. There is a national union in the defense of Venezuela, so do not dare, because this people is tired of them, of those who have falsely assumed the condition to speak in a derogatory and denigrating way about Venezuelan women.
Falsamente se han arrogado la condición para hablar de manera despectiva y denigrante de las mujeres venezolanas.
And to that extremist lady with terrorist plans against the electrical system, against the gas distribution system, we say that we Venezuelan women are here, that we Bolivarian women are here to defend this homeland.
Que aquí estamos las bolivarianas para defender esta patria.
The special emphasis of the resources will be directed to the communal power.
A healthy, self-sustainable economy with an emphasis on our people, and with special attention to the people's power. That is the mandate you have as deputies.
The democratic opposition wants peace. Nothing matters more to us than peace. The democratic opposition rejects the use of violence in politics. It energetically repudiates foreign sanctions. The democratic opposition is committed to the best future for Venezuela, a future of generalized prosperity, so that peace, democracy, and well-being for all may be the sign of 2025. In our most enthusiastic endeavor, the economy tied to social issues is the key.
A survey reveals that 60% of the private sector perceives that the economic situation will improve in a year. The National Assembly approved in first discussion the two bills requested by the Vice President.
Madeline Garcia, teleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela. And now we have a short break coming up, but first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Peru, the Latin American Network for Economic and Social Justice met on Tuesday in Lima to analyze the ultra-conservative offensive economic, social, and climate justice in the region. Within the discussions, the evasion of tax commitment of the great Latin American fortunes gained special relevance. 10% of Latin American millionaires concentrate 71% of the wealth of the entire region. However, they only pay 5.4% in taxes, according to figures from the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC. In this regard, meeting participants are organizing initiatives to offer alternatives to this very unequal model. And in the United States, an economic earthquake is predicted if economists if Trump's planned mass deportation of illegal immigrants is carried out. Henry Camelo from New York City tells us more.
The massive deportations promised by President-elect Donald Trump, according to experts, could have catastrophic consequences for the U.S. economy.
There are so many constructions, so many bridges, so many things that are thanks to the work of our people. For the Hispanics who have immigrated for many years, a U.S. citizen will not come to earn $15 or $20 an hour. The U.S. citizen will want to earn more.
According to a report by the U.S. Immigration Council, the deportation of more than 11 million undocumented immigrants would cause a loss of up to $1.7 billion in gross domestic product, a number that would put the U.S. at the same level as the 2007 recession.
The effort and labor that these immigrants put into this economy is huge. California, Florida, and here in Virginia, we are not going to see white people doing these jobs anymore because that is where the migrant population is.
Y es que cuando se habla de mano de obra,
And when it
las
comes to labor,
deportaciones
mass
masivas
deportations would
eliminarían más
eliminate
del
more than
30%
30%
de
of
los
construction
trabajadores de la
workers,
construcción,
28%
el
of
28%
agricultural
de
workers,
trabajadores
and a quarter of
agrícolas y
janitors.
una cuarta parte de los trabajadores de la limpieza.
Los negociantes que tienen
Businessmen who have a fear about losing these working hands, we also invite them to join this joint struggle. And that is where we are going to have to approach these small businesses.
Y es ahí donde nos vamos a acercar. Tenemos que acercarnos pues a estos pequeños negocios porque pues si las corporaciones grandes
Because the big corporations like General Motors or Ford are already resenting these declarations. I believe that all this is a political, economic, electoral game, and we will soon see how everything moves after January 20th.
que pues ya vamos a ver cómo se va a mover después del 20 de enero.
Según el Consejo de Inmigración estadounidense,
According to the U.S. Immigration Council, more than 1 million entrepreneurs are undocumented, and in 2022 generated more than $27 billion in revenue, as well as jobs. New York immigrants hope Trump won't judge the many for the wrongdoings of the few.
por las malas acciones de unos pocos.
Sí le pido al presidente que
I asked
toque
the
el
president
corazón.
to touch his heart, that all of us who are here are not bad. We are people who deserve opportunities,
Somos personas que
and that they give us the
merecemos
chance to work.
oportunidades y que nos den las oportunidades de trabajo.
Practically half of my clientele that I advise at the business level are people who work with an ITIN number. That is, people who do not have a valid social security number, but who nevertheless have companies, businesses, and employ many people.
Según el reporte, inmigrantes indocumentados
According
pagaron
to the
en
report,
2022
undocumented
cerca de
immigrants paid nearly $47 billion in federal taxes and more than $29 billion in state and local taxes in 2022.
Aunque el estudio muestra que el aporte de inmigrantes indocumentados
Although the study shows that the contribution of undocumented immigrants to the U.S. economy is indisputable, the possibility of removal from the country for many remains a latent fear. So experts recommend having an immigration lawyer in case of facing a deportation raid.
Pablo Daniel Ho y Henry Camelo, TeleSUR, Nueva York.
We now move on to other topics. The South Korean Defense Minister Kim Jong-un resigned amid the unprecedented crisis in the country. The minister, who resigned while the chief of staff was deploying troops, has apologized to the people, holding part of the responsibility for the martial law that has generated a political crisis in the nation. The government, along with the United States, promised to defend the international order based on rules. Precisely, the president and the former defense minister were the main allies in the military operations conducted jointly by Washington and Tokyo on the Korean peninsula, thus contributing to raising the risk of a nuclear confrontation in the area. And in this context, in South Korea, the Confederations of Trade Unions, the largest trade union organization in the country, has declared an indefinite general strike demanding the immediate resignation of President Yoon Suk-yeol. The organization justified the strike as a response to the martial law decreed by the president and lifted in a matter of hours after the unanimous rejection of the General Assembly. In addition, South Korea's main opposition party, the Democratic Party, has also come out to call for the president's resignation, claiming that the ruler did not meet the necessary requirements to implement martial law. In this context, several of Yoon's top advisors have resigned massively, including the head of the South Korean cabinet, the head of the policy cabinet, and the national security advisor, as well as 7 other advisors. And Ghana will hold general elections on December 7th, in which voters will elect a new president and all 276 members of the parliament. This election is particularly noteworthy as it follows the conclusion of President Nana Akufo-Addo's 2-term limit, leading to a competitive race primarily between 2 major candidates. Mahamadou Bawumia, the current vice president representing the ruling New Patriotic Party, and John Mahama, the former president of the National Democratic Congress. The elections occur against the backdrop of significant economic difficulties for Ghana, including high inflation rates that have impacted living standards and increased poverty levels. The country recently experienced its first ever sovereign debt default, leading to negotiations with international creditors and an IMF bailout. And now we have a second show break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you will be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final show break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. At the United Nations, the permanent representative of Russia, Vasily Nevencia, denounced that Ukraine is helping the Syrian rebels against the government of President Bashar al-Assad. During a meeting at the UN Security Council, the Russian diplomat claimed that Ukrainian intelligence services were preparing Hayat Tahrir al-Sham terrorists in the Syrian province of Idlib to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Nevencia also noted that some fighters openly boast of this link and do not hide the fact that they are supported by Kiev. In addition, the Russian diplomat to the UN stressed that there is an identifiable trail pointing to the Ukrainian main directorate of intelligence behind the hostilities and the supply of weapons to the fighters operating in northwestern Syria.
In this context, we wish to pay close attention to the identifiable role of the Ukrainian main directorate of intelligence, the GUR, in organizing hostilities and supplying weapons to fighters operating in northwest Syria. We have repeatedly stated, including at the UN Security Council, that we refer to the identification in Idlib province of Ukrainian military instructors of the GUR and that they were training Hayat Tahrir al-Sham fighters for combat operations.
And also in this context, Syrian Ministry of Defense confirmed that they maintain control of the city of Hama in central Syria. According to the announcement, the Syrian troops control the outskirts of the city and hold different outposts. Still, the terrorists have seized some localities and villages which the army is struggling to retake. The military report released early on Wednesday morning also reported the recovery of the Kafar axis northeast of Hama. The ministerial office also assured that so far, in joint operations with the Russian allies, 200 terrorists have been neutralized in Hama and Idlib, among them several foreign leaders. And the current terrorist escalation against Syria is part of Western plans to divide the Middle East region, fragment its countries, and redraw the maps of the area in accordance with the ambitions and interests of the West. Let's take a look at the following report.
The ongoing terrorist offensive against the Syrian provinces of Aleppo, Idlib, and Hama since last Wednesday, November 27th, has become the main news in the regional and world media. A scenario that benefits the Zionist occupation entity by reducing the international pressure that had been gaining momentum before these events to stop the Israeli aggressive escalation against the Palestinians and their Lebanese brethren.
Libaneses.
The terrorists were trained and equipped with advanced warfare devices to fulfill the plans of Western and Zionist intelligence services to attack Aleppo, to fulfill several objectives, including diverting world public attention from what is happening in southern Lebanon, from Israeli ceasefire violations, and from Zionist crimes in Gaza, which is currently far from the world media screens.
The Zionist occupation nation entity is the main enemy of the entire Arab and Islamic world, and therefore we consider that this enemy is the only one benefiting from the current terrorist escalation against Syria. So we are fighting the same battle in Palestine, Lebanon and Syria against a common enemy, which is the Zionist entity, and its allies in the United States and the savage West.
At a time when many countries around the world are expressing their strong condemnation and rejection of the terrorist attacks on Syrian soil, the United Nations and its Security Council remain silent and inactive, an attitude that the Syrian government and people and their allies denounce as proof of the submission of these international organizations to the will of Washington and its plans against Syria and the entire region.
We denounce the policy of double standards applied by international organizations and the great powers of the world that sponsor and finance terrorist organizations and use them with the approval of international authorities to fulfill their strategic plans in different parts of the world, including our region, and against our governments that they falsely label as terrorists because they do not renounce their sovereignty and do not submit to their will.
In the face of these Zionist U.S. plans that threaten the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Syria and the entire region, the Syrian Arab Army, together with its allies of the Axis of Resistance and with the support of the Russian Aerospace Force, continues the battle against the terrorists, determined to defeat them and thwart the plans of their financiers.
And with this information, we come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Beren de los Santos. Thank you for watching.